Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. I invite everybody to rise and join Council in the singing of the National Anthem. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Madam Clerk, we have no regrets, and Councillor Palmer is on leave. And are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, there are none. We need confirmation of the minutes of the previous council meetings, and those are listed in the agenda for the public and you, members of council. Councillor Longo moves approval. Councillor Lischina, I believe you're seconding. Thank you very much. May I put the vote? All in favor? Opposed, if any? And the minutes are confirmed. We have no delegations for this meeting, and that brings us to our standing committee reports. The first report is the Community Services Committee report of October 15th, and I'm looking for a mover and seconder, Councillor Adams and Councillor Robertson. Thank you. May I put the vote? All in favor? And any opposed? The report is adopted. The next report is the Administrative Services Committee meeting of October 15th. Council, what's your desire? Councillor O'Meara. Councillor O'Meara moves, and seconded Councillor Chisholm. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That committee report is adopted. Next is the confidential report of the closed session of the Administrative Services Committee. Is there a mover and seconder? Councillor Sanju and Councillor Lischina, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is adopted. Madam Clerk, do you want me to announce the contents of that? No? All right. Then let's move to agenda. That's good enough for me. Let's move to agenda item number 1, the bylaw to amend the banking bylaw with the associated report from the Finance Department. We need a mover and seconder for this routine matter. Councillor Knoll and Councillor Longo, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Adopted. Thank you. The next is the neighborhood 40-kilometer-an-hour speed limit pilot. And the motion is that the neighborhood 40-kilometer-per-hour speed limit pilot report from engineering and construction be received. And 2, that the area bound by Upper Middle Road, 3rd Line, and 14 Mile Creek be added to the neighborhood 40-kilometer-per-hour speed limit pilot program. Are there movers and seconders for this? Councillor Elgar and Councillor Duddick, thank you. May I put the vote? Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question. If I haven't read that we're working or that we've been in contact with the Halton Regional Police on this pilot project as well, and I'm just wondering if staff might be able to clarify if they would do any normal enforcement, or if that would in any way, shape, or form impact the results of this this study. I'm wondering if staff might be able to speak to that.
Yes, we have been in touch with Halton Region Police to let them know the scope of the pilot and to ask that enforcement be sort of as usual so that it's not swaying the pilot one way or the other.
Okay, thank you very much. That was it, Your Worship. Thank you.
May I put the vote? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you, everyone. The next is the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program Transit Stream. And we need a mover and seconder for the following. 1, that the report from Oakville Transit be received. 2, that the transit capital projects identified be approved for submission to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. And 3, that the transit capital projects identified in the report be referred to the 2020 Budget Committee. Do we have a mover? Councillor Duddick. A seconder, Councillor Haslett-Deal. Thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Adams?
It appears to me that our staff have a presentation or some material to provide to us, and I think it would be helpful to have that presented to council in order to give us the opportunity for questions and answers.
Well, Councillor, you have a detailed report. If you have questions, could I ask you to, would you be willing to ask them?
I would be happy to go through a couple of questions, but I do understand that Councillor Longo had asked some questions earlier, and that maybe staff could answer those for us.
Councillor Longo?
So if I did ask 3 questions, they were answered by staff, but if you want them circulated or if Barry can talk to them now, they're related to the impacts of the environmental life cycle of the batteries, the implication on maintenance, going from diesel to battery operated vehicles, and then the last question was related to bulk purchasing. If other jurisdictions were buying similar vehicles, can we buy together? So
I think they were excellent questions, and I think it would be good to have the answers.
Well, let's ask Mr. Cole to provide those answers.
Sorry. Through you, Mr. Mayor. There were 3 questions that Councillor Longo asked. One of them was with respect to the sourcing of materials used in the batteries for battery electric buses. There, the implication is the environmental benefits of battery electric buses are obvious. What about any environmental concerns that might be related to the sourcing of the material? I indicated that there are some with respect to how lithium is extracted. Lithium and cobalt are both used in the creation of these batteries, but that battery technology is an evolutionary process. It's evolving very quickly, and that both lithium and cobalt are considered to be interim solutions, and that ultimately we would expect that the source materials used in the making of batteries was as clean to the environment as the battery electric buses are in operation. From a maintenance perspective, the question centered on the impact on maintenance more from a staffing as opposed to a cost perspective. From a staffing standpoint, as the costs would be between 30 and 50% less in terms of maintenance, we would also expect that there would be a reduction in positions of mechanic and mechanical service person over a period of time, although we wouldn't expect this to occur until about a third of the way through the transition process. At that time, we would expect probably maybe one less mechanical service person, because of course you're not doing things like changing the oil. There is no engine. There's no transmission fluid because there is no transmission. There's no particulate matter catchers on the exhaust system because there is no exhaust system. There are thousands of less moving parts, and so we would likely need fewer mechanics. That being said, electric buses combined with all of the onboard technology that we now have and that we will have means that we have a requirement for more electronic technicians. We have one now, we're going to need more soon. So this is largely a case of training people, preparing them for the future. Part of the question involved the union. We've been very upfront, very open with the union in terms of where things are going from a transit technology perspective, that we're looking at electric buses. As a matter of fact, it even came up during negotiations. It was discussed then. We've even gone so far as to talk to them about the eventual introduction of autonomous vehicles. So it's all out there, they're aware of it, and I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that the people that we currently have who might be affected by this receive the proper training and are assisted in their transition to the new technology. The third was with respect to procurement and whether there was an opportunity for or what other municipalities were doing with their ISIP funding and whether there might be an opportunity to leverage economies of scale to get together and all purchase electric buses to reduce the cost. Oakville Transit participates in the Metrolinx joint procurement, the Transit Procurement Initiative. We're in and out of that depending on whether it's advantageous to us or not. In the case of conventional buses, it's not. We can get conventional buses at a lower cost to our specifications than we can through joint procurement. On the other hand, specialized buses, they meet our specifications and have a competitive cost. We can do the same thing for electric if the opportunity presents itself. We also include piggyback clause in all of our RFPs so that other agencies, other municipalities can participate with us and lower the price. We did that with our with our purchase of 30-foot vicinity buses, and we had 8 other transit systems join us. So those were essentially the answers to the questions.
And then I have just one other question, and that is, can you clarify how the onboard Wi-Fi would be rolled out? When and how?
The onboard Wi-Fi is a project identified for 2020, and there's a number of parts to that. And when we talk about onboard Wi-Fi, the tendency is to think of it in terms of the customer benefit, the ability of a customer to get on board the bus, log on, use our Wi-Fi, so they're not impacting their data. That's just part of it, and it's actually for us, it's not the main part. Wi-Fi on board the buses, as well as within the garage area of the bus, enables full automation of things like our video surveillance camera download system. So right now we have to actually go and physically pull the hard drive out of the bus, take the bus out of service until such time as that whole process is complete, plug it back in. Wi-Fi would enable automation of that, so the bus pulls into the garage and the video is automatically downloaded to the server. It allows us then to be absolutely compliant with retention bylaws, retention policies in terms of cutting it off at 2 weeks. Right now, it's all dependent on the storage capacity on the hard drive and the hours of service and the number of cameras on the bus. So the automation of that process as well, we would be combining that with the display wall within the control center. So Wi-Fi would also enable live streaming of the onboard surveillance cameras in matters of emergency. So if the driver activates their emergency button, it would automatically trigger live stream of the video camera on board, so we can actually see what's transpiring on the bus instead of calling up and listening and hoping we can determine what the nature of the emergency is. So those are some of, we also have full, you can also move to automation of the onboard video, the onboard vehicle monitoring system, so that we can track in real time what the vehicle components are doing and how they're functioning on board a bus that's in service. So those are all some of the larger benefits of it, and then you also have the customer benefit, which could in fact drive ridership.
And what's the timing of it?
We would initiate that in 2020. We would probably have it operational end of Q2, beginning of Q3.
So it's a spring, summer
Yes.
kind of project. Thank you very much.
Councillor Elger.
Barry, thanks for coming. Barry, I wonder if you could just expand a little bit on the electric buses, because I think this past council in the last term was asking questions. You came up with the reasoning why we weren't into it yet, because if we got into it now, it's going to be sole sourced by a certain types, because there's like 3 different types, and they don't swap, you can't swap out. It's quite different than the gasoline or diesel engines.
Yes. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Correct. Thank you. That was something that we did discuss earlier, and as I mentioned, battery technology, electric bus technology is evolving very quickly. At that time, each of the bus manufacturers that were creating electric buses all had proprietary charge systems. They were unique to, so if you bought from manufacturer A, then you were married to their charging infrastructure, and then if you bought from B, you had to have theirs, so you could have 3 or 4 different types of chargers within your facility. That is for the most part standardized now, and so that takes that off the table. Other issues were the range of the batteries. Now the batteries at the low end of most claimed range is sufficient for probably 96-97% of all of our vehicles from the time they go out in the morning to the time they come back in the evening. So the range, we don't believe, is an issue now. There are some other considerations in terms of how long it takes to charge, the staging of the charging as the buses come in. If it takes 4 hours, for example, to depot charge one bus, then how many chargers do you need to be able to move all of your buses through and have them ready for service the next day? So, you know, you have to plan the dispatching of buses. It's not as simple as fueling buses like diesel.
Well, I thank you for that, because, so it sounds like they have come a long way in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Grant.
Well, Councillor Elgar got my big question, so let's go to the small one. Small capacity electric buses, just to confirm, we're not talking about the size of the bus, we're talking about the range of the battery?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're talking about the size.
Okay, so,
Yeah, so small capacity, meaning more of an on-demand type of vehicle. So in terms of actual size, 25, 26 foot instead of a 40-foot conventional bus.
okay, so that would be used for special senior services or on our smaller routes?
It would be similar in size to what we currently use for specialized and on-demand service.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Your Worship. Reading this report, the detail, I'd like to commend you, Mr. Cole, on the detail of this. This is exciting information and the technology that we're moving forward. I know, I guess I'm a little impatient that we have to wait to 2035 for everything to be converted over, but this is really exciting information, and I'm glad we're moving in that direction. So congratulations to you and your team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Thank you again for the great report and your leadership of transit. Could someone just clarify, so this gets submitted, when would we hear if we are approved of the funding? Because it is a submission, is that correct?
Mr. Cole, are we waiting for Santa to respond, or is it a different elf?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We're a little bit unclear in terms of the timelines for approval of submission. We believe that the approvals will come in sufficient time for us to be able to act on the 2020 projects that we're envisioning. The projects that we are submitting, I've discussed them thoroughly with not just transit staff, but with finance staff as well. And we're confident that all of them meet the criteria for the funding. So I was at a meeting with other transit directors and GMs yesterday on a number of matters, and we obviously discussed this. And there were some who had already submitted projects but had not heard yet.
So just for clarity, and maybe I'll look at Nancy.
Well, Councillor, there's a two-layer approval process. You've got the province and the feds.
Right.
It'll be a time.
Right, so 2020 budget is being looked at. Are we talking that, just as we were with the culture grants, that we might not hear this till April, May, June? But it won't be as soon as January.
It could be.
It could be.
To Mayor Burton's point, we don't know if it'll be April or May, but it could be January.
They're not telling, so you're asking for clairvoyance. And we're happy to be clairvoyant when we can, but I think it's hard to do here. So you still want to second the report? Okay. May I call the vote? Just before I do, I want to thank the members of council who are still here, who with me voted to build the transit facility on Wycroft that made this possible. Because when I remember when I became mayor, I wanted electric buses, and the first lesson I had to learn was that we couldn't handle them, in Jack Nicholson's words, because we didn't have the proper facility. And that's why we built that amazing facility on Wycroft. And so you council members, we were farsighted, and look, patience works. We're getting there, I think. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. Thank you, everybody. Now we come to new business, and we've quite a lot of it. The first thing is that we have a notice of motion, and it's from, actually, I wanted to deal with this one. It's from Councillor Sanju and seconded by Councillor Knoll. And because Councillor Sanju will not be here at the next council meeting because of her leave, it is asked that we waive the procedure bylaw in order to act on this resolution tonight. And Councillor Duddick is so moving, and Councillor Elgar is seconding. All those in favor? And the requisite number of hands have risen, the bylaw is waived, and we can consider that tonight. I will read it now, and there'll be, from what's printed in your paper, an omission of words. Okay? So, here we go. Whereas the Tarion Warranty Corporation, Tarion henceforth, was established in 1976 via the Ontario New Home Warranties Act and is a nonprofit entity in Ontario, whereas Tarion's primary purpose should be to protect new home buyers by ensuring builders abide by provincial legislation, whereas Tarion currently holds a monopoly in this space as it is the only new home insurer, the only authority for recourse or new home management for new home buyers, whereas Tarion is a self-policing corporation financed entirely by builder registration, renewal, and home enrollment fees, which are largely passed on to the home buyer, whereas homes being built in Oakville and all over Ontario are not meeting consumer expectations as the minimum threshold for occupancy as set forth in the Ontario Building Code, and while deemed safe, these are not quality living standards. Whereas the More Homes, More Choices Act indicates that all municipalities should expect an increase in new homes and the subsequent issues the homes create for residents and municipalities. Whereas on February 20th, via a backgrounder, the Ontario government indicated it was undertaking a review of the Tarion Warranty Corporation to, quote, strengthen consumer protection and make lives easier for Ontarians, unquote. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Oakville request that the Ontario government, at minimum, proceed with the guidelines set forth in the backgrounder from February 20th, which are strengthening Tarion's governance and oversight, establish a separate regulator for new home builds, conduct multi-provider insurance model analysis, better inform consumers buying pre-construction condominiums, and that the Ontario government initiate a consultation process with all stakeholders, including municipalities and constituents, to best understand the concerns around the new home warranty process and an update to the Ontario Building Code to address these concerns, and that this resolution be forwarded to the City of Burlington, the Town of Halton Hills, the Town of Milton, the Region of Halton, Halton MPs and MPPs, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Ontario Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Premier of Ontario, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario for information. Discussion? Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. With respect to the building code, and I've gone through this process once before, and I was a little bit frustrated too with some of the challenges we have. The Ontario Building Code has a cycle of every 5 years for reform. Are we ahead of the deadline on this, or do we have to wait 5 years for this to come forward?
Commissioner?
They're in the process right now of updating the building code. I know they have had a 5-year cycle, but of late, it's been almost a revolving cycle. So they're in that process now.
Sounds like I can put the vote. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Councillor Sanju and Councillor Knoll, congratulations, that carries. Also in accordance with the procedure bylaw, the following notice of motion will be considered at the next council meeting to be held on November 18th. It's not desired to escalate it because members of the public who are interested in this are planning to attend to speak to it. And this is a motion moved by me and seconded by Councillor Knoll, and it concerns the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And it reads, it's brief, it reads, whereas the town of Oakville is deeply concerned about the grave threat that nuclear weapons pose to communities throughout the world, and whereas the town firmly believes our residents have the right to live in a world free from this threat, and whereas any use of nuclear weapons, whether deliberate or accidental, would have catastrophic, far-reaching, and long-lasting consequences for people and the environment, therefore be it resolved that the town of Oakville supports the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and calls on our governments to join it. And we'll be taking that matter up at the November 18th council meeting. We I'm not aware of any other notices of motion, but I am aware of some requests for reports. Shall we dive into the requests? The prize for the briefest request for report ever seen goes to Councillor Chisholm and Councillor Duddick. And here it is. Moved by Councillor Chisholm, seconded by Councillor Duddick. Now, listen carefully, you'll miss it if you know. That staff prepare a report to council regarding the regulation of video camera surveillance on private property. May I put the vote? All those in favor of authorizing this report? Opposed? That's carried and it's authorized. We also have a, I'm just checking to make sure I'm even. So is this quality of new homes also a request for report? Okay. All right, so the next request for report, now that I've figured out which is which, is moved by Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel, seconded by Councillor Giddings, and this concerns the downtown Oakville streetscape construction. That staff report back on the first phase of the downtown construction project at the December 16th meeting of council, including the causes of delays which resulted in falling behind schedule, specifics as to what will be done to ensure accuracy of reporting against key milestones in Phase 2 weekly, including accuracy of information and better communication with retailers and town council, changes in trade organization, timing and phasing of the various work to safely maximize daily productivity, allowing for earlier completion, changes in project management oversight, possible improvements to fence, signage, and accessibility for residents, any recommended changes to our current mitigation budget, confirmation of 2020 work schedule and possibility of block-by-block construction to minimize effects of construction, a summary of the learnings shared by the businesses impacted in Phase 1, and how we will address the remaining work to be completed on George to Dunn with minimal disruption to the businesses and residents. We further request the town report what penalty funds will apply to the project and ability of those funds being shared amongst the operating businesses in Phase 1 downtown Oakville. Any discussion? Councillor O'Meara.
Thanks. I just had a question of the mover and seconder in terms of the last part. Are we asking staff to look at whether we're legally able to give taxpayer funds to the businesses from a penalty, or are we asking how we go about doing that? I'm not really sure on what we're asking staff to do with that second part there.
Well, the plain English says that the town report what penalty funds will apply. And so I would take that to mean from the existing contractual arrangements. And if the movers have something else in mind, they should perhaps consider modifying their wording. Otherwise, that would be what I think and understand.
My question was not with respect to what you just read. My question was with respect to right after that, and ability of those funds being shared amongst the operating businesses. So are we asking?
They're asking a report of could they be?
Okay, from a legal perspective then, or an operation perspective of how the staff would go and do that?
They're asking, could they be shared? The decision would be council's. I suspect that's your concern.
My question is with the word ability.
I understand it to be, could they be shared?
Okay, well, then could they be shared would be very clear, but the ability to do it to me is, it might be nuanced in language, but there's a difference to me between could they be shared or ability to.
Well, Councillor, you should either move to amend their, I don't know, do you really want to rewrite their request? I think we're going to get the same thing.
It was just a simple question of the mover and the seconder. So.
Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel, you're the mover.
I have no problem changing it. Could they be shared?
Because it means the same thing.
Thank you for asking.
So it's changed. All those in favor? Opposed? Everybody's in favor. It's authorized. Oh. Well, Councillor Adams, ask your question.
I wanted to know if we could add the word should in addition to could.
Where?
As I understand it, the motion or the request was changed to will apply to the project and could those funds be shared? I'd like our staff to answer the question as to whether they should be shared, because I understand that we've got many a case around town where from time to time a project requires us to go after a contractor for something, and we don't share money with residents and others nearby.
Well, Councillor, could you accept that the should question is council's decision, and when it has the facts, it gets to decide?
Yes, I could appreciate that, but I want to make sure that our staff are answering, providing us some advice on that matter.
I'm confident they'll mention that.
Thank you.
All right. Next, requested by Councillor Sanju and seconded by Councillor Elgar. This one is about the quality of new homes. Whereas the residents of Oakville require and deserve better quality homes, we request the following report from staff for May 2020. Request staff report on the legislation in place to ensure the quality of new homes meet the expectation of consumers. In particular, what are the requirements under the building code prior to occupancy of a home? What is the role of Tarion in protecting the quality of homes for consumers? What support is provided to new home purchasers in terms of Tarion's role? Review what options are available to the town to improve quality of the homes delivered to residents, i.e. bylaws. Review what the province can do to protect consumers, i.e. updated legislation, etc. Do the requesters want to speak or add anything? Councillor Sanju.
I'd love to speak to it really quickly, Mayor Burton. Thank you very much. This really comes from a couple of different things. Not only have we seen, obviously, an uptick of new construction in Ward 7, I think the rest of the town is also feeling the pressure from a Tarion perspective or even from a residential perspective with regard to the type of quality that we see in Oakville and I think all over Ontario. After having attended AMO, it seems that there is a concern at the provincial level, at least with the other municipalities, with the same concerns. So that is really where this is coming from, and I do feel like it's a town-wide initiative, not just something for Ward 7, but obviously the impact would be larger given the amount of new homes that are being built there.
Councillor Elgar, as the seconder, do you have any remarks?
I'd just like to say, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Every question we ask here, I think, is very, very clear of what we're looking for. Thank you.
Well, it sounds like you're getting an uptick in complaints about the quality of the results that your new residents are getting. Is that what it boils down to?
Well, in fairness, I think, even one of the simple things that people wouldn't even think about would be that you can buy a house and it has 5 bathrooms, but only 1 toilet has to be operational. I think people are kind of surprised that could ever be true, but it's in fact, that's the way it is right now. And that's just one example.
We have Councillor Adams.
Sorry, we've been going through the request for reports, and I had a question about the status of outstanding issues, if I could ask. Going back a stage in our agenda. And if I missed you saying it, I apologize, but I had a quick question of our staff about one of the items.
You have the floor.
Then on page 89 of the agenda is item number 5 regarding the private cannabis retail stores in Oakville. I've had a couple of questions from constituents about when this item is coming back. Is it coming back at our December council meeting or some other date? And could staff tell us briefly in what way it's coming back? Is it coming directly to council or is it coming through a committee? What's happening?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the report is coming through committee, and it's coming in December. It will come before the end of this year.
So is that coming through the admin service committee or to the community service committee?
I
In
thought
December.
it was coming through the community service committee
In December.
in December.
Thank you very much.
If I could just clarify, it may even be November. Point was, it'll be before the end of the year.
Oh, so it may come in the November cycle, not the December cycle?
It possibly, I will check the dates and let you know.
And because it's a matter of some public interest, how are we going to tell the public at which meeting they should pay attention?
So anyone who had come to the previous meetings that we had on the cannabis, we'd be sending out notice to them for the appropriate meeting that it would be going to.
So if it was going to be the November Community Service Committee, then all of those who had attended previously would get a notice. Are we also putting something up on our website as a banner item, or how are we going to handle that?
Certainly, we could put something up on the website.
Thank you.
Council, the councillor raises a good question. This is one of those issues where I think we want to be able to say that we've given proper, adequate notice. Why can't we agree that we'll hear it on December 18th, I believe is the meeting, and have the publicity begin instead of winding up with a compressed period of notice? I mean, how do we feel about that? Anyone? Councillor Adams, you brought it up. How do you feel about it?
It would be, well, it's right before Christmas. Merry Christmas. I don't know if December 18 is the day that we want to do it, but I do agree that it would be nice if we could give people proper notice about it and not give them only a week's notice that is coming to a community service committee meeting.
Or so, sorry, the standing committee meeting where it would be ventilated and heard is the 9th.
The 9th of,
December.
and then we would get to see it in its entirety.
On December 16th. Well, the entirety would be the 9th at committee.
The ratification would be
The
Yes,
ratification would be at council.
Yes, I understand what you're saying.
16th.
Thank you.
I noted you. You're on the list.
If staff believe that they have a complete report and it's going to be available and ready on the 9th, then I suggest that we ought to provide proper public notice ahead of that. All right. I'm being told
No, you're right.
it is Monday the 9th, yeah.
Okay.
I agree with you. It ought to be properly notified.
Okay. Councillor Haslett-Thiel and then Councillor Knoll.
Well, in the spirit in which I think that question was asked, I would like to suggest that we can give notice that this is going to come to council, but do it in January. People have things going on in their lives right around between December 15th, 16th, right straight through to Christmas. I think we can talk about cannabis in January and still have a fulsome discussion.
Councillor Knoll?
Oddly, I was going to make the same suggestion to avoid the Christmas rush, but also I was going to ask the question, do we have to have this go to committee first, or can we walk directly to council like the original issue in the first place? Because it will be a matter of public interest. It should be televised, and instead of exercising it twice, we could just go around once with the entire council like we did when we dealt with in the first place.
How do you feel about, what would be your reaction to a special council meeting for the purpose?
In January?
In January. How about February?
4/20, we'll do it on April 20th.
All right. Ooh. All right, so how about this? How about we leave it that I'll work with staff and arrange to call a special council meeting for the matter in the new year? Is that, precise enough? I don't think we need a motion for that. Councillor O'Meara?
My only question, Your Worship, is I do appreciate the extra lag time we get to review the report and read it over at an ASC or PD. If we've got any way to give us a little time to review the report and ask the questions prior than just a 2-day.
We can arrange for you to have, staff and I will arrange for you to have 2 weeks' notice.
Perfect, thank you.
Because one of our goals is maximum public engagement, so it makes sense not to have a compressed, right? Councillor Adams.
Your Worship, I appreciate that you would like to make this go through quickly this evening, but I think it would be important for us to actually, by council resolution, make the change, because it's actually in our outstanding council items. And so to change the
So I have,
direction.
under the procedure bylaw, the power to call a special meeting and to move items around. But you're perfectly entitled to make a motion, and I'm sure any one of us will second it, and we can, I'm happy to do that.
I would like to do that so that those who are interested in the matter
All right.
are clear about what's happening.
So, Councillor Adams, let me see if I've captured the intent here. And Councillor Grant, are you
second.
seconding? All right. So I believe this is the motion I'd like to hear, that a special meeting of council be organized in the new year with 2 weeks of notice of the report to consider the cannabis matter.
So moved.
Any discussion, changes, further helping? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. We made a friendly decision that I think is helping everybody now, including everybody on both sides of this issue. All right, so anybody else with any other thing? Because there's at least one more thing, and that is this bylaw 97. Madam Clerk,
This bylaw was just missed by putting it, it's just being passed with the rest of them. It was,
okay. So my sheet is different than your sheet on this respect. Okay, I'm more comfortable now. All right. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, we have reached the point where we need, this is for consideration and reading of the bylaws. We need a mover and seconder for bylaws 112, which is the bylaw to amend the banking bylaw that we discussed earlier. 97, which is the bylaw to provide for the licensing of eligible charitable organizations or nonprofit organizations to conduct and manage lottery schemes for charitable purposes or objects. And 116, the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of a meeting of council. And I specify the detail because of the confusion I had between the two copies. Moved by Councillor Robertson and seconded by Councillor Giddings. I thought your hand waved. All those in favor? And the bylaws are adopted. Thank you very much for your time and attention. It's been great working with you, and we are adjourned.